Good evening. I'm calling this meeting to order. All members of the Town Council are present, and I'd ask that you all stand and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. First on our agenda are our announcements, and I would ask our town manager, Jim Cunha, to take us through those, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. This Wednesday is Yom Kippur, so the schools, Barrington schools, will be closed. Also this Wednesday at 1 o'clock, for those of us on the back nine, there'll be a Mastering Medicare seminar at 1 o'clock at the Peck Center for Adult Enrichment. Columbus Day will be Monday, the 14th. Town Hall offices will be closed. Also on that day, we will have our second annual Barrington Day of Caring. The registrations will begin at 11 o'clock in front of Town Hall, and from there we'll send people to homes in our community. They're in need of some support from this, so we welcome everyone. There are applications available online or at the clerk's office. Saturday, October 19th is the Community Shred Day. It will go from 9 to 11 a.m. at the Department of Public Works. You must be a Barrington resident to participate in that. Saturday, October 26th is the Drug Take-Back Day at the Public Safety Building from 10 a.m. till 2 p.m. And then on Saturday, November 2nd through Monday, November 4th, will be the Friends of the Library's annual book sale. The hours are posted Saturday 9 to 5, Sunday 1 to 5, and Monday 9 to 3. That's all I have, Mr. President.
Thank you. One more announcement, and that is that we recently proposed amendments to our comprehensive plan involving Bay Spring Avenue corridor development guidance, and we have been approved for those. This has been certified by the Department of Statewide Planning. So, and with a nice note congratulating us on the hard work. So that was good work by the Planning Department and Phil Harvey. The next item on our agenda is to discuss and act on the consent agenda. Typically, these are non-controversial matters that are passed as a group or accepted as a group, and unless someone asks that these be separated. If someone requests that it be separated, we will take them out, vote on the remaining, and then address the rest of it. Does anyone have anything they'd like to remove from the consent agenda?
Yes. Number 6, the minutes from September 9th, right? 9th is the full meeting, or 6th?
Okay.
And the finance and the building report. The what? The finance director report and the building report.
I was going to ask to remove the building report as well.
Okay. Anything else?
And I was going to ask to remove the Department of Public Works report.
Okay. So we'll remove the reports. With removing items 6 and 7, do I have a motion to accept items 4, item 10, and then approve item 8, which is the abatement list, approve item 11, approve item 12, and approve item 13?
So moved.
Second.
Made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. So the first one is the minutes, and that was Councillor Breyer.
Yes. So on the second page, where it says Mr. Breyer discussed the structure of monthly reports, discussion ensued. Mr. Breyer requested the following changes. It mostly focuses on the structure, and the structure was less of it, and so if the 3 bullets could be removed and just changed to requested that year over year and month over month data be included with variances.
So
remove the 3 bullets, yes?
Yep.
And just on that same line above the 3 bullets, Mr. Breyer requested the following changes to go,
To include year-over-year and month-over-month data with variances.
For the financial report?
Well, no, so that was, I was basically asking for that for all the reports. I had shared in advance the data that I was looking for.
Okay.
And then at the bottom of the same page, in the paragraph, Mr. Carroll requested agenda item 13 be removed. I had also requested that that be removed to see if anybody from the family or representing the cemetery was there to speak on it.
so at the bottom where it says Mr. Carroll requested for the agenda item 13, as well as Mr. Breyer.
Yes, to see if anybody from the family or representing the cemetery wanted to speak.
I think you don't need to, you can just add Mr. Breyer also, so
Yeah.
rather than,
Yeah, at the end.
As that.
Mr.
Yeah.
Breyer also requested that item 13 be removed to determine if a member of the Allen family was present.
That's all.
Any other changes to the minutes?
Mr. President, if I could, I'm concerned that we not change, when Mary does the minutes, she listens to the tape of the meeting. And so sometimes there are corrections because there's a misspelling, or in the case where Councilor Breyer had also added, she probably didn't pick that up. But I'm concerned when, like the bullets, we remove the bullets because they're of historical nature. Quite often when we're researching something that's happened before, we'll go back and get the context of what the discussion was. And so if we pull those types of things out, we're really changing the minutes to what we think they should, we'd like them to be, vice what they were. So I would just caution that I think we need to be very careful when we change the minutes that we're not changing what was actually said during the meeting.
We could say that prior to the meeting, Mr. Breyer requested that year-over-year data be added, and then because I think that was in a document, and then we can just say discussion ensued. Mr. Breyer requested the following changes in the bullets. Because I think that's before there was a document, that's my memory, there was a document that you produced that asked for a number of different things. Would that satisfy you if we added before discussion ensued? Prior to the meeting, Mr. Breyer requested year-over-year data be...
I mean, my reading of the bullets makes it seem like I cared about the order of the columns more than I cared about what's in the reports. And I haven't, it's not important where the columns are, and I wasn't asking for them to be in a certain place, but those words might have been used when we were going back and forth talking about the sheet that I had provided. But really what was important was the year-over-year and month-over-month data. And that's why I had taken a while to discuss it. I mean, it doesn't matter that much. I guess as long as the request for the contrasting data, month over month and year over year, is included in the minutes, it's fine if somebody 7 years from now thinks that I cared about the order of the columns.
So after the word monthly reports and before the words discussion ensued, Mary, could you add prior to the meeting, Mr. Breyer requested the addition of year-over-year and month-over-month variance data?
The thing is, we all discussed the structure
Yeah.
of the monthly reports. Mr. Breyer had specific changes he wanted to see made, but the discussion was amongst all of us. And I think actually those 3 bullet points were discussed by all of us. And the year-over-year was something that Mr. Breyer had in his early, his advance report.
Right, but then I do remember these discussions about the finance report because I was trying to bring it down to specifics.
But here it says Mr. Breyer requested the following changes, and the bullet points are applied to his request, when in fact those bullet points came out of our the 5 of us discussing the issue.
I just remember it differently. I remember us talking about it and asking if that was acceptable to Councilor Breyer with each of these changes. You had different changes. You had a change that you just wanted to, you had a very minor change to the DPW's report, which doesn't appear in here, but I don't think that's, the minutes don't have to be a transcript.
Right.
We do have the recordings if anyone wants to go back, so.
Okay.
So with that change, do I hear a motion to adopt the minutes as presented with that change?
Excuse me. I just want to make sure. So we're still eliminating those bullets?
No, those bullets will stay in.
But we're putting in prior to the meeting, blah, 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 before discussion ensued?
Yes.
It's not accurate that I requested for the order of the column to be specific. That's just not accurate.
Oh, so we can strike the column order should be as follows.
From bullets 2 and 3.
Well,
No,
I think we did actually talk about that. That's my memory of it.
We might have talked about it, but I didn't request it. And this is saying Mr. Breyer requested the following changes, and I didn't request the order to be specific.
Why don't we table the September 9th? Can we move this to discussion? We'll look into it. Okay. Do I have a motion to adopt the minutes from the September 6th council meeting?
So moved.
second.
Made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
September 2nd or 6th?
Six.
I was absent along with Joy, so we can't.
Oh, so you guys
I
can.
abstain.
Okay.
So Joy
Can't second.
can't second.
Oh, well, then I'll second September 6th.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? And any abstentions?
Aye.
So the motion carries. As to the September 9th minutes, do I hear a motion to continue that until the November meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. The monthly...
We also have the July 29 executive session minutes on there.
Right. Do I have a motion to accept the executive session minutes of July 29, 2019?
So moved.
Second.
Made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. The next item is the monthly department reports, and Councilor Breyer had a concern about one or two of those.
Yes, not concerns, just questions.
Okay.
On the finance report, it looks as though tax revenue is about 1.8 million. Ahead of ahead of prior year's collections, and yet there's it looks like about $400,000 deficit through 2 months. And I was just wondering if that's purely timing, with taxes, just more were paid at the end of August and the year before, beginning of September, or something else.
Yeah, the taxes aren't paid till September 30th. In addition, revenue's offset in the summer for our recreation department. Most of their revenue comes in. So I think there's Kathy's not here this evening.
Oh.
She's at the RIPEC meeting. But when I look at when it diverges from what would be a 12-month average, there's usually an explanation. And, for example, recreation would be we get all the beach receipts in the summer. I would say the same thing with the taxes that we, with first taxes aren't paid until September 30th.
Oh, the actual, I might have misunderstood the question, but prior year tax collections there,
Yeah.
that indicates taxes collected that were due in the prior fiscal year. So
Got
that's
it, not during the same
That's not
period.
a year-over-year
Thank you.
comparison. Yeah.
Thank you. That's more of a... All right. So that's it for the finance report for me.
Okay. Were there any other, Councilor Breyer, did you have any other questions?
Yes, on reports in general. So the planning report, and I just wanted to point out that it's exactly what I was looking for with all that we went through last month about talking about reports. All of the qualitative information is still there, highlights, things that are going on in prose, and then also a sheet with data comparing current month to the prior month to that month last year and year to date. It's very helpful to look at and see both a big picture and a small picture.
And I'm grateful, too, that with the permits for solar installations, I'm happy to see that we've got 17 so far this year, which is great.
Oh, actually, I did have a specific question, though, on it. I just forgot to circle it. I think there might be an error in some of the cells because the year-to-date number in September for total fees collected is about $12,500, but the September number is $18,000. So this is page 4.
Is it September or October that you're looking at?
September.
Well, I have a question on that one as well.
Is Phil here?
Oh, never mind.
You found
I was
it?
looking at the wrong column.
Okay.
Sorry.
Not there.
Yeah, no, I was looking at a variance column and not a year-to-date column.
Okay.
Hold on, Kate has a question.
On that September, the thing that I use that I always zero in on are the number of demolitions, and in the last column, the change is 6, and I just don't understand where that number comes from. What is it relative to?
You want to take this? She's looking at that number right there.
Looks like it should be 1.
Okay, that makes me feel a little better. Okay.
Any other questions on any of the reports?
I had requested that we look at the Department of Public Works.
Okay.
And I guess my question is, it's less a question than kind of an observation. Trash collection has gone from $39 to $47 a ton increase. Our tonnage collected is going ever higher and higher, and I'm thinking it might be time for a discussion into looking at what other cities and towns are doing about their collection. I know this is a statewide issue, and kind of seeing if there are ways to kind of get those numbers under control. We're a town that prides itself on kind of recycling and, taking care of plastics. And I hate to see just the sheer tonnage that we put into the landfill. I know that we're a high giver to the landfill, and I'd like to see us try to wrestle that down.
So I think there are a couple of things. One is that Vice President Weymouth and Councilor Breyer are working on the issue of composting. And if we can do that, if we can either encouraging composting, home composting by people, or coming up with some collection, we can reduce some of the tonnage. I don't know how much, but every little bit helps, and that's great for the environment too. So the other thing is Barrington typically ranks near the top or at the top of recycling percentage. And I just don't know, Alan, if have we had loads rejected recently? I know we've had loads rejected for ridiculous reasons, like the newspaper was wet on a rainy day.
Yes, we have had loads rejected. It could be excessive moisture. In our tour of the landfill, resource recovery, we saw how thorough they're getting nowadays. And our former finance director, Dean Huff, is the finance director there, and we still have a breakfast group. And I guess from what I'm hearing, the recycling market is getting more and more difficult. And over in Massachusetts, this tonnage cost at $47, this is a bargain. It's more like $80. And I think we're going to see higher and higher fees because resource recovery, the landfill itself, only has about 15 more years left. Rhode Island prohibits incineration of our waste, so it may be getting trucked to Ohio, where they have from what I heard, 100-plus year landfill capacity. This tonnage, 525, yeah, it's high for August, but the month of September it actually went down. So sometimes it just fluctuates, and it could be people had some more cleanups, threw away, furniture, heavy things, and sometimes we just get those where they're a little bit of a blip. One thing I encourage is look at the annual final number. That's the good number, in my opinion, that you can see across the year and compare it to last year and the year after. To be honest, our population's growing slightly. It's not a lot, but we are growing a little bit. But the tonnage is actually, it's not really jumping up. It's pretty level. Our recycling's been good, but we are facing rejected recycling loads, and a lot of it's due to the markets and how clean they want this product. From what I heard, when, let's say, paper is baled up, if there's any contamination, it's shipped right back. They don't even look, they just take it and they throw it back on the ship and send it back. And that's what Resource Recovery told me. Where in the past, everything just went, let's say, for China, and they opened it up, they picked through it, and then they recycled it. So now they just send it back because there's no market in it, and the market is drying up. But I hear from my counterparts in Massachusetts, we have it made, and they are right. It is a lot easier here. But, I mean, like I said, take it with a grain of salt. That is higher than the last year and the year before. But I think in 2016, it was actually higher than this number. I think it was around 535, and I didn't put that number on here. So sometimes it's a blip. Or you get more weekdays in the month. There's more tonnage.
Yeah, I probably, if I look over the whole year, I probably won't see. But I think the landfill is getting full.
Right.
Trash is going to become only a bigger issue.
Correct.
And I think that it might behoove the town to start to really kind of come to grips with what makes sense going forward. I think it's better to do it earlier than kind of on the cliff. So thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
If I can emphasize, to everybody at home, clean recycling is number one. Make sure there's no bags, make sure everything's clean. Jars, take the caps off. It's worth the extra seconds in your day to make sure it's clean. And this way our recycling loads don't get rejected. We are pretty good, just if I could say that. As far as rejected loads, I think we had one last month, and that was due to excess moisture. We had the heavy downpours, which we've never had previous to this past year. And then we also had excess film in one of the loads previously. But for the most part, we've been pretty good. So, thank you.
We appreciate your efforts. Thank you.
May I make a comment? Having been on that tour of Rhode Island Resource Recovery, it was mind-blowing. And I think every resident in Rhode Island needs to go on that tour. The effort that it takes to separate, especially the plastic bags, from the rest of the quote-unquote recycling was mind-blowing. And even at the very end stage, when all the plastics have been crushed and put together, or the paper has been crushed and put together in these enormous bales, there are people, as these bales are being rolled out of the building, there are workers picking through the bales, like 5 to 6 people picking out plastic bags that do not belong in those bales. And it's really a remarkable and rather devastating tour. I just read in a report that the two most common articles or materials that are put into landfills, the top one is food scraps, is food waste. So I think composting is really important. The second is plastic. That's what's filling our landfills. Just putting it out there.
We may want to talk about this as an agenda item for the next month about we can always do better in terms of awareness. I think we've done very well. That's why I'm not crazy about the idea of a pay-as-you-throw, because I think the idea behind that is to encourage more recycling. We're pretty good about recycling when you look at us compared to the rest of the state. But I would love, and seeing the Fourth Estate here this evening, I would love to see some people learning, don't put a plastic bag in with your things. Don't gather all your bottles in a plastic bag and throw that in the recycling, that kind of thing, so we could avoid any rejected loads.
And cover the bin on rainy nights.
Yeah.
Yes.
Especially for those people who put their cardboard, which is the most, what do you call it? The most
Porous?
No, it's the single most important thing to be recycled. That's what they
want cardboard.
They want the most. I saw at least in my neighborhood, the night before trash pickup, people putting out loads of cardboard, and it was the night of the deluge, which is unfortunate.
So do I have a motion to accept the monthly department reports?
So moved.
Second.
Made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And no abstentions. The motion carries. Thank you. Next item on our agenda is the Bristol County Water Authority monthly report. Thank you, sir.
Any questions?
Yes,
Yes.
please. Can you just go over the issue with the cease and desist of the,
Yes,
and
certainly.
what the status is at this moment?
All cleared up. It was cleared up. We had a special meeting on Tuesday. It was cleared up, and everything was resolved. What had happened, frankly, is that an individual who is responsible for creating these reports. This is as I indicated in my report, this is health and safety program. That's for their employees and other people who come on the site. It's done for every kind of a big project like this. They have consultants who prepare these programs. Okay? So the fellow who came to us, who was with BISCO, said, I took prior reports, mushed it all together in the computer, sent it to the consultant with the hopes that he would make modifications, change it, come back to me. In other words, we would go back and forth a couple of times, and he would use what he wanted, because a lot of this is cut and paste. I mean, it's people, you change the location. So there was references from a prior report to Fall River, project in Fall River. There were other kinds of things in there that clearly it was not a finished report. So what we were faced with, and this was our attorney came to us and said, this is not something that management can just deal with. You have to decide whether this is a breach of contract. That's what we were deciding. Not whether the contractor was capable, because they've already been checked out as being capable. They've done work for us. Not in this kind of project, but they've done work for us. They were investigated with all the other contractors who bid on this job and were deemed to be qualified to handle it. The case in point was strictly, is this a breach of contract? Now, had we said yes, because several of the members who were there, we had 9 members, 3 of them said, this is indicative, as I put in my, indicative of the sloppiness of the management. Okay, and so they were not happy with it. And if they can screw up missending a report, which is a draft, including that, it's part of the contract provision, and one of the things they have to provide, then what's going to happen, what else are they going to do wrong? 6 of us said, wait a minute, it's a contract provision, they have the right. You tell them, I mean, we just got it, and we went right back and said it's wrong. They have a right to fix it. Can you fix it? And in fact, they were able to fix it very quickly. The other point was that this is the general contractor. They are preparing the site, they are digging out, they are responsible for setting things up. But our board of directors, our engineers and our consultants have already decided that the people who make this patented form of a PVC, they get the order. They're the only ones who make that. And so BISCO is not making the PVC pipe. That's made by an outside company who has a patent to the materials that make it. The welder who welds the 40-foot sections together in up 400 feet, and they pull it and then repeat, that welder is certified by the manufacturer of the PVC. This person knows exactly how to handle this pipe, how to put it together. BISCO is not doing that. The third element, key element, is the installer. That's the company that's going to put the pipeline, put the string through the cable, through the existing pipe, pull this pipe through the existing pipe. And again, BISCO is not doing that. So the key elements in this project are separate, subcontracted, and they've all been approved. And we felt, A, it's important to get the job done. We don't want to hold things up. We don't want to get into an involved legal issue. And even if we win, we've wasted a lot of time in getting the project done. Fall can be coming, winter could be coming, who knows what the weather's going to do. Get the project over with and complete it. And so the vote was 6-3 to move forward. Within a day or so, it was corrected. We put some additional little tweaks on it. It had to be signed by a licensed, I forget the term that's used, but the licensed person who's qualified to sign these things, although in the typical form, it's not necessarily signed by such a person. So we put a few extra little screws to tighten things. And we felt that it was an error because it was so obviously an error. And we moved forward with it pretty quickly. So that's going on. The project is started. All the pipe has been delivered. I'll forward some pictures to you because Pam sends the board of directors pictures. All the pipe is on site. They're mobilizing. I think the welder is there now, and she's setting up a project for us to come, those on the board who want to see it sometime this week, see it start. Probably it'll be more interesting to look at it next week once things are really moving. Then you see all the pieces. You see moving the pipe, welding the pipe, and you see the people pulling the item through. So that's all taken care of. And a little scary for the moment, but these kinds of things happen in contracts, and obviously at over $3 million, this is important that we deal with it correctly. So, any other questions?
Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Thank you, Chairman Klepper. Next item on the agenda is to discuss and act on interviews and appointments. We do not have interviews this evening. We've interviewed 2 folks for the Discover Newport position. This is one where I think I said last time this was an embarrassment of riches because we have 2 people who are really eminently qualified. We looked into whether they could have both of them appointed because they'd be great representatives on the Discover Newport board, but after doing so we found out we can only have 1 member. And did you reach out and see if either would be interested in the Economic Development Committee?
I did. Twice. I've asked them if they were both. I told them that I felt they were both eminently qualified for either position and would want them to be interested in the EDC. And neither responded, and I followed up, and neither responded. So I'm assuming the answer is no, and that they're both still interested in the Discover Newport.
Okay. So we have a tough decision to make.
Elizabeth Buckley reached out to me to ask some questions, and I asked her if she was interested in the Economic Development Commission, and she replied that she was not, that she feels that her qualifications are better suited to Discover Newport. And unless the other applicant reached out to anyone else, I would like to make a motion to appoint Elizabeth Buckley to the Discover Newport.
I'll second
board.
that. I'll second that based on the same rationale. She took the initiative to reach out, and that's the differentiator here.
Right. I think they both are equally qualified, but I spoke with Elizabeth and was not contacted by Alicia. But I also said that we would keep the others, whoever wasn't appointed, her name on file in the event that the appointment has to step down for any reason during her term.
So motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? And no abstentions. The motion carries. Elizabeth Buckley is our newest representative. That's a tough choice. We do not have anyone as an applicant for the Economic Development Committee, but we can reach out to Ms. Curry again on that for next month. Next item on our agenda is the public comment section. This is an agenda item for members of the public to speak. If you would like to speak, please indicate you'd like to speak by raising your hand. When you're recognized, please approach the microphone and state your name and address for the record. Does anyone want to be heard for the public comment? Sure. Yes, sir. Please come forward.
Good evening. My name is Barry Lyle. I'm from Warren. I didn't know exactly what I wanted to say to you tonight, and I have to tell you that I'm pleasantly surprised at your, how could I put it, your tenor, your demeanor. It is so gracious. I came in here expecting to probably want to speak at a minimum rate of about 500 words per minute because I've got 2 minutes only, and I don't know how I'm going to cover what it is that I have in front of me, but I hope that you will be as gracious with me as you've been in the part of the meeting that I've come to. I live on Serpentine Road. I live on the Kiki, Kiki being the reservoir. I'm a proponent for not taking it down and not pulling the plug on it. My family's been on the Kiki since the 1880s. We had a dairy farm up until 1981. I came here with a couple of ideas to actually, I hope you're hearing me well enough. And I'm not speaking to just you, but also to the people who are here as well in chambers. I don't know if you've come to a final decision about this whole situation. I haven't. I keep hoping that things...
I should clarify so that you
sure, please
understand.
Because I don't know what's going on in Barrington at all.
We do not, that is a decision for the Bristol County Water Authority. We appoint people to those boards, but... I'm
aware of that, and I know who the person was who just spoke here a minute ago.
Yes,
but
he's the chair.
I'd still like to speak to you about the general topic.
You can. I just want to be clear that we can't overrule them.
I don't know if you can overrule them, but you certainly can give them some input.
Sure, as can you.
And I'm being very gracious in this. I suppose that I could have come up with something with specifics. I distrust a lot of information that I see in the news and in the newspaper because I know better. A lot of things that have been discussed in the newspaper, all you have to do is just take a walk and look at what we commonly call the infrastructure of the reservoir, and you'll see what's going on. And if you've seen it as I have for a period of years, you know there's a lot more common sense to what's going on over there than what's in the newspaper. I quite frankly, I hesitated about bringing in a hammer and a can of WD-40 to tell you that a few years ago, that's all it would have taken, literally, to take care of the problems at the dike. The dike is simply a structure that has 3 conduits going through it. Each one has a check valve. It's got a flap gate on it, and the flap gates are stuck. It really is as simple as that. I don't understand why things have gotten so out of hand about that. I wanted to tell you that you'll never see a photo of the source of the Kiki. I don't know if you've been to it. Have you been to the source of the Kikimewit?
No, I haven't.
Partly a rhetorical. You have?
I have not.
It is. It's called the Warren Reservoir. It's in Swansea. It's on Reed Street. If you go there and you take one look at it, you'll say, my God, this place is unbelievable. It's absolutely gorgeous. You'll think that you're in the northern part of New Hampshire in the Connecticut Lakes region. And then what you'll do, once you look at it, you'll say, my God, what happens between there and what's in front of my house on Serpentine Road, 2.5 miles away? And then you'll ask yourself again, why are we sacrificing what's up there? Because the focus of everything is, again, what's in front of my house and not the sources of the water at all. That reservoir up there is 80 acres. There are 2 kayakers who regularly fish it. One of them has what's called a fish finder. He tells me that the deepest part of it is 17 feet. Nobody knows about it, and you certainly won't see a picture of it in the news provided by the Bristol County Water Authority. This is just, I need to jog your way of thinking, and that's what I'm trying to do tonight. Second item I have here. The Water Authority and the Town Council in Warren are making plans right now with this ongoing thing to flood 1/6 the area of the town of Warren. 1/6, I should say, of the land area of the town of Warren. This doesn't have any impact on you whatsoever. But what I want you to do is to just ask yourself, would you do something like that in Barrington? If somebody had the authority to go, for instance, okay, and dig out your canal that's between Brickyard Pond and Providence River, and every single time the tide came in, it would flood 1/6 more of your town's land area. Would you be in favor of that? The reason that I'm asking, in addition to that, 319 acres that abut the reservoir in Warren are under protection for conservation, open space, and agricultural easements. This has been going on since 1969. 319 acres of land there, most of it open. If you go through there now, it's pasture. It's all protected. It's going to have a groundwater table that's going to change from sweet to salt. Why do I bring this up to you right now? Because I don't trust the town of Warren's town council to do what's right at this moment in time. And you certainly shouldn't think that the Warren Town Council is going to look out for your benefits when it comes to the Water Authority and your input as regards that. Because I don't know where they're going with all of this. I'm giving you something that I hope that you can grab onto, that's going to cause you to ask questions, particularly of those people who represent you to the Water Authority, one of whom just left. I have absolutely no idea where they're at. On my road, on Serpentine Road, when I was a kid, there were 4 dairy herds.
I'm sorry, sir. We do have other people who want to speak for public comment, and
Thank you for listening to me. I don't consider myself as being a rash person whatsoever, but this is just beyond, and you need to know about this. You need to know there's a lot of stuff going on there that really is incomprehensible.
Thank you.
Mr. Lyle,
so much.
for our minutes, could you please spell your last name and your address?
I'm Portuguese. It's L-I-A-L.
L-I-A-L. And your address?
Yeah, it's 19 Serpentine Road in Warren. If
19 Serpentine Road in Warren.
Please, if you have any... I have a year and a half of documentation at home on work that I've done on this. I'm a retired educator. I'm retired from Providence School System.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. You've been very gracious to me.
Would anyone else like to be heard? Yes, sir. Please come forward.
Charlie Payne, 43 Chapin Road. Mr. President, councilmen and councilwomen, I think I have seen the source of the Cook-Commute, and I think it's absolutely gorgeous. Just wanted to add that. Seriously, there's some really beautiful land up there, north of where it starts. That's not why I'm here, though. I come here tonight with a cautionary tale about a beautiful little New England town. Once upon a time, there was this little town, and it was perfect. Until one day, unbeknownst to anyone, the town's tax assessor went rogue and made up a crazy rule. This crazy rule would add $350,000 to the tax bill of a small group of taxpayers. This was $350,000 more than their fair share. 6 months later, when this small group of taxpayers found out about it, they started to ask questions. Well, at that point, the town hall circled its wagons around the tax assessor, refusing to give out any information. It's all fiction, right? But not to worry. In every little town, there's a town council. The town council represents the taxpayers. The town council has oversight over town hall. And this town council, back then, was full of very bright folks. But alas, they were politicians. And this was back during a time when politicians never could seem to just do the right thing. Politicians back then, they covered up, they blamed the other guy, they tried to find ways to turn public opinion against their adversaries. So the town council in this little town held some secret meetings. It met with the town attorney and with the folks from town hall. They strategized about how to stay out of court and how to keep the town from having to pay back its $350,000. The town's attorney, being an attorney, must have known that this was a crazy rule, but his job back then was just to go along with the politicians. And all the folks at town hall, they had to protect themselves. So they gave the politicians just enough information to keep them happy. And the politicians back then were very careful not to ask too many questions. After several secret meetings, the town council was confident that it had a good strategy. They had decided to ignore the taxpayers' concerns. They reasoned that all they needed to do is just stay out of it. Because you see, the town council figured that those taxpayers who were most upset would probably get their relief anyway. All they'd have to do is file an appeal for an abatement, which of course meant the town would have to pay back some of the money, but most of the aggrieved taxpayers that the town had predicted would just go quietly into the night. The town would be able to keep most of its ill-gotten $350,000, and eventually everyone would just forget about it. How perfect. But as all cautionary tales go, there's not a happy ending. You see, the town council had miscalculated. First, it did not have all the facts. And second, there were some people in this little town that were not concerned about their tax bill. These folks, instead, all they wanted was to know whether the government was going to operate fairly and out in the open. So you see, ultimately, the town council's strategy failed. When all was said and done, a year later, the taxpayers were still furious, the tax assessor had lost his job, and the town council was all Republicans. The moral of this story was best summarized by one of the former members of the council who said, after her defeat, "We should have gotten all the facts first." The end. Of course, that's just fiction. This town council isn't worried. You have all the facts, right? Except I know of at least one document that you may not know about. We should be talking about these kinds of things. If you do know about it, you probably didn't pay much attention to it, because there's one sentence right in the middle of this document that changes the outcome more than you might imagine. But it needs to be addressed fairly quickly. Otherwise, there's an outcome that may not be what you have predicted. More like that other little town.
Thank you, sir. Would anyone else like to be heard? Please come forward.
My name is Bethany Link. I live at 10 Vermont Ave. We are one of the properties that abuts the middle school. And I was supposed to come here with Greg O'Brien, who is at 9 Vermont. She is ill tonight. She has provided photographs that she would like me to give you guys. Should I?
You can give those to the clerk.
So I've lived at 10 Vermont for about 3 years, and prior to the school start time changes, I've experienced a lot of times where I've been blocked in. On both sides of my driveway is a circular driveway, but the way that it's positioned during school dismissal and school start, a lot of times people are swooping around to drop kids off, and they block our drives.
So, just so that I can orient myself, you're right by the path that leads to the tennis courts?
The path is directly in front of my house.
Right, to the tennis courts.
We're, we feel that the town has been incredibly helpful when there's been a bit of a nuisance with the construction. Our family is very excited about the changes that are happening. We have 2 kids in the school system, both very young. Kindergarten and 3rd grade, so we're very excited about the prospect of fields being behind our house, that the neighborhood kids can play in and that they'll participate in the town sports and the school district sports. So we're very happy about that, but we are concerned that once the fields open up, if we do not have a no parking sign on that section of the path, which it shows both Ms. O'Brien's drive and mine, we are going to be blocked in. Greg's concern as well is if there is an emergency, someone gets hurt on the fields, this is the quickest way for emergency access as well. I can say after 3 years of living here, I have been blocked in numerous times by just drop-offs and pickups and people giving me the, hold on a minute while I need to get to work in the morning. So once games start, this isn't going to be, oh, excuse me, could you move your car? This is going to be me waiting for someone to move their car, an hour, possibly 2. So I hope this is the correct forum to discuss this need. It's definitely something that Ms. O'Brien and I feel will definitely be a problem and has been a problem in the past. And we do feel, I feel that the town has been very helpful when we have had nuisances of this sort, with being one of the properties that abuts the middle school.
This is one of the forums that you can address this to. Because of the Open Meetings Act, we can't act on anything having to do with that tonight.
Okay.
Because we haven't given any notice to anyone that there'd be any discussion.
Okay.
But I've already put it down on we put down at the end of the meeting, which you don't have to stay for, the setting the agenda for the next, and I put down the parking issue on Vermont. Is that
Vermont
Vermont?
Ave, the end of Vermont Ave.
Yes, I know just where you're talking about.
And as you can see with the pictures, it is a very narrow space right at the end. It's not the same size as the street that is on the other side of Joanne. So
Okay.
we do hope that it is on next month's agenda. So,
Thank you.
thank you.
Mr. President, just to clarify, Chief DiCrescenzo and I have discussed Vermont Ave, and we're probably going to have a proposal for the council for the next meeting.
Great. Great. Thank you. Would anyone else like to be heard? Seeing no one, I will move on to the next item on the agenda, which is to discuss and act on municipal energy aggregation. We have a presentation from Good Energy.
I need to recuse myself for that.
Mr. O'Rourke.
Mr. President, members of the board, thank you for letting us appear before you tonight. Just to give you a little background on Good Energy, we are the national and Massachusetts leader in municipal electricity aggregation. We're active in every state in the country that has aggregation. And as I say, we've done a very successful job in Massachusetts. The recent change in the law here in Rhode Island has made Rhode Island very attractive to national suppliers who want to come into the market to supply residents and businesses with electricity. We have a very short presentation for you. We'll go over that and we'll open it up to questions.
Excellent. My name is Jamie Rhodes. I'm also with Good Energy, and I'm assuming I got the right clicker here. So I'm going to just test it out one moment. Yep, all right, good. Now I know what I'm doing. Thank you. So real quick, I know we've made this presentation to both the Resilience Committee as well as the Economic Development Committee. So we've had an opportunity to talk to a number of folks here in town about this, and I believe they've made the recommendations to you. And the goal for us tonight is just to kind of walk through what is aggregation and how it operates, and to make sure that the council is fully informed and aware of what we're talking about and what we're proposing to do. So to overview, community aggregation is the idea of bundling together the electricity load of everybody who's on National Grid's basic service. So anybody right now who's just getting their electricity supply from National Grid, that's either residents or small businesses, if we are able to bundle together that electricity load and put it out to bid, we have an opportunity to lower rates for individual consumers, while at the same time also allowing us to increase the amount of renewable energy that everybody's using in their standard electricity rates or in standard electricity use, while still keeping that rate below what National Grid currently has to offer. So buying in bulk, obviously, is what leads us to have cheaper electricity. As everybody generally knows, the more you buy, the better of a rate that you're going to get. And the law change allows the municipality to act as that aggregator on behalf of all of the residents and small businesses in the town. So you get to be the conduit through which this is aggregated and sent out into the competitive market in order for us to capitalize on what the suppliers have. So as you can see here, and we have some paper copies of this if you want to take them back as well, there's only a number of states that have so far authorized this to move forward, and the law here in Rhode Island is closely mirrored after the Massachusetts law. And so we're going to bring a lot of our experience in Massachusetts to the table here in Rhode Island, and we'll walk through that a little bit. So why we aggregate? The biggest part is price stability as well as cost savings. Right now, as you're probably well aware, your electricity cost changes every 6 months when National Grid does its next 6-month cycle. aggregation allows us to lock in a specific electricity rate for 12 to 36 months. So it doesn't have us that fluctuating of high cost in the winter, low cost in the summer. We can in fact level it out and have a predictable price for every resident and small business here. It also allows for consumer protection. So as opposed to right now, if somebody goes out to the competitive market on their own, a lot of the suppliers have like 6-month introductory prices, and then if you don't pay attention to what's happening, that rate will balloon significantly afterwards, plus charge you termination fees if you want to get out of it. And this has absolutely been had a predatory impact on especially folks that don't speak English as a first language and older residents that are taken in by that low cost initially, and it's not something that they stay on top of 6 months later. So through this aggregation, we're going to have that consumer protection. Every piece of the plan is going to be publicly vetted, both through the Council and the Public Utilities Commission, as well as what goes into the plan is going to be discussed in public as well. So it also allows the town to be in kind of that driver's seat to say, this is the consumer protection pieces we want to have in our consumer electricity prices and system. So it opens that door to making sure that we're acting in the best interest of the residents and small businesses. And also a big part that we like to advocate for is increasing the amount of renewable energy that's in the mix. So the state has its renewable energy standard right now, and we encourage towns to investigate putting additional 5% or 10% on top of that. So right now, I believe, I hope I get this right, it's about 18.5% is the state renewable energy standard. If we pick that up to 5 or 10%, we're starting to make significant progress in reducing our reliance on fossil fuels, and that's available through through aggregation, and still allowing individual residents and small businesses to even go up to 100% renewable energy or down to the state minimum, depending on what their price sensitivity is, as well as their values are for what their electricity supply is. So to give a little bit of an illustration of what this looks like. So right now, if somebody moves into Barrington and they turn on their electricity, they're on National Grid's basic service. That's a default service. What the aggregation program does is instead of National Grid being the default service, the town's aggregation program would be the default service that everybody's enrolled in. And so that's that big circle right there. Instead of it being National Grid, let's make the big circle what we create. And within that, people are, if they say we don't want to be part of the aggregation program, they can opt out. Once again, no fees, no cost. All they have to do is sign a postcard, sign an email, make a phone call, take some action to say we want out of the aggregation program, and they can go back to the National Grid's basic service. It will be there. Or they can opt out to a different competitive supplier if they found somebody that meets their needs and what they're looking for. And additionally, somebody who's in the aggregation can opt up and say, I want 100% renewable energy. I want 100% renewable energy credits for every electron I use in my home. That option's available to them. Same thing, postcard, email, phone calls, website sign up. They can opt up to 100% renewable energy. They will pay a premium on top of that, but once again, that's completely within their control. At the same time, if the town does a 5% or additional 10% renewable, every resident can say, I want to opt down to the state minimum renewable energy standard, and once again, they'll have that additional price savings if they're a price-conscious shopper for it. And then to be clear, that anybody who's already opted out, has gone to a competitive electricity supplier, they're not in the program to begin with. They've made an active choice as far as what sort of electricity supply they want, and they get to maintain that. When that contract runs out, if they say, I want to get into the aggregation program, they'll be welcomed with open arms. It will be there, once again, no costs, no termination fees, no transfer fees. The program is there for them to use. So to walk through the steps, so the the General Assembly passed a pretty specific law as far as what has to happen for an aggregation program to go into existence. And right now, we're here on step 1, which is the legislative authority. The city councils, town councils have to pass a resolution authorizing a plan to be created. Now, to be clear, this isn't saying this is the plan, it's going to happen, it's definitely going to be done. This is just to say, let's create a plan, and let's see if everybody likes it, and let's make sure that it has what we want in it. So that's a step we're at now, is asking town councils to pass a resolution saying, let's put out a plan, and let's see if we like it. The next step is to work with a consultant to create the plan. That's why we're here. We serve that role. We've done it once again. We've got 42 active aggregations in Massachusetts. This is what our business is. And we would be seeking to have that, to work with you as a consultant to help you create the plan. Now, the core role for us is to take your decisions and make them real. We're not asking town staff, town managers, or finance staff to go through and figure out how to make the plan. We have done that before. We want to bring that expertise, but we will need the town to make decisions as far as how much renewable energy do we want? How long of a term do we want? What sort of outreach do we want to have happen? And then our job is to deliver on that plan as you all have dictated. Following the creation of a draft plan, it goes to a public hearing. There has to be a public hearing before it can go to the Public Utilities Commission. It has to be published at least 2 weeks in advance, more if possible. And once again, we will advertise this. Both the requirements are in the newspaper. It's funny that we still have those requirements, that we have to advertise everything in the newspaper. I think we can be a little more expansive than that and make sure we reach people. I say that as I read the Providence Journal while I was sitting here, so what's wrong with me? And after the public meeting, any changes that are recommended, we can make those changes that the council, that the administratives, that the staff wants to see that comes out of that public hearing. And then the plan gets submitted to the Public Utilities Commission for them to review to make sure it's consistent with state law and that it's in the best interest of ratepayers. They will hold another public hearing in the town. We've had our conversation with the Public Utilities Commission about how this process will move forward, and their idea is that if the town has a plan, we want to have the hearing for that plan in that same town and make sure that it's well advertised and people can come in and provide public comment as they deem necessary. Following the Public Utilities Commission approval of a plan, we go out to bid. We aggregate the load here. We work with National Grid to make sure we have accurate consumer information as well as load information so we can get out to competitive suppliers and say, this is the load that we're looking at. This is the electricity needs of this municipality, and start having the conversations with them to make sure they have all the information, they can sharpen their pencils, they can give us the best deal. And from a competitive supply perspective, they are looking for more places to sell their electricity, and there's not a lot of opportunities left for them in the industrial and large commercial sector or the institutional sector, because most of those users have already gone out into the competitive market and done this because, well, it saves money. And so they're going to sharpen their pencils and they're going to look to give us the best possible price on electricity. And we do the lead up into that. We're making sure to have the conversations. We're giving you indications of what that pricing is likely to be. And then bid day comes in and we have those 3 to 4 national suppliers come in and say, this is what the kilowatt hour rate that we'll give you. And these are the terms that we can offer from, once again, 12 to 36 months. And then it's whoever in the town is given the responsibility to choose which piece of that we're going to go with. Is it a 12-month? Is it a 30-month? Is it 5% renewable? Is it 10% renewable? We'll be able to have that matrix to choose from and compare. Following that, every consumer will receive a notification. This is the aggregation rate that we've secured through the supply process. This is National Grid's current rate. Do nothing, and you're in the aggregation. Send in a postcard, make a phone call, and get out, and you can stay at National Grid's rate. The idea there is that our job is to make sure we deliver to you a rate that's better than what National Grid has to offer, so we're going to do our work, and then to make sure everybody in the town sees what those different rates are. We anticipate, I can't promise anything because it's the future and I cannot do that. Our anticipation is that we're going to be able to show each resident that here's this rate at National Grid and here's a lower rate from the aggregation program that we've created. We want you be in the aggregation program. If you don't want to, go ahead and choose something else. And then the final piece is once that piece is done, you send the contract back to the Public Utilities Commission because they're tracking how these programs are developed across the state. And the aggregation program begins at roughly 30 days later, the next meter read after that. So that's kind of the long description of point A, where we're at now, to what will likely be about a year-long process to actually get this all out to bid and through the Public Utilities Commission. So our last couple slides here is just to give you an indication of what our results have been in a couple towns in Massachusetts, and then it's going to be hard to read up here, so I won't go through it, but I do have a paper copy of actual table of what the rates are for you to look at. And so this might be hard to see, but this is the town of Brookline. Brookline chose to be extremely ambitious and chose a baseline of 25% additional renewable energy for Massachusetts basic renewable energy standard. And you can't quite tell there, but there's a green line there that shows that 25%, that's what the rate was. you can't see it, but it's just over 11.1 cents per kilowatt hour. So that was the rate that's available for all residential and small business customers. The orange line below that is that if somebody wanted to opt down to just minimum renewable energy standard, that's the rate that was available to them throughout the length of that contract. The blue line is what was Eversource's utility rate was. As you can see, it changes every 6 months, and over the life of the contract, whether they were at 25% renewable energy or the state minimum, they saved over that particular contract year. The next one is DEDMS. This is the longest running aggregation that we have in Massachusetts. And as you can see, the orange line, once again, is except for that one period that we knew about going in, we knew that that was going to happen. We were not going to beat Eversource on that one particular period. But then over the life of the contract, you can see the significant savings that added up over time. And just to note, the reason why the aggregation rate steps up there is that it went back out to bid twice over time. So we worked with them for a period of time. We saw an opportunity, went back out to bid for another one-year contract. As that was ending, went back out to bid for another contract. So it's that opportunity to continually renew and take advantage of the competitive market. So that's some of our success rate. And then once again, that's jumble on a screen right there. But once again, I have paper copies of it we can provide you, but it'll be able to show you both the percentage savings over basic service as well as the actual dollar amounts per town. And there's another graph too, but another chart too. The idea being that each one of these were actually buying groups that came together. So multiple towns went through the process of developing the plan, getting approved by the Public Utilities Commission. And if they're at about the same point, then when we go out to bid, we can actually bundle together the bundling and say take not just one town out to bid to the competitive market, but multiple towns out, so that they're bidding on that entire load of everybody that's approved a plan. And once again, the idea is if you make it into bulk at an even greater rate, we might be able to get that rate down even a couple more tenths of a penny. Obviously, it sounds like a small amount, but it adds up. So that's quickly. Yeah.
Just a couple of additional points. Even though we're retained by the municipality, we're not paid by the municipality. There's no expense to the municipality. You make the decisions, we do the work, and we get paid after electricity starts to flow, which in this case would probably be a year from now. We do all the work up until then, and we're paid by the competitive supplier who wins the bid at the rate of $1 per megawatt hour. And essentially, two other points. Anyone who's on a discount program with National Grid, that stays in place. And also anyone who has solar panels, their net metering agreement is, again, separate from the aggregation. It doesn't affect that program at all.
Could you explain that a little more? Because that was going to be my question. Because as far as I know, we have a contract with National Grid.
Right. Your net metering contract with National Grid stays in place. Whatever that contract says, and again, you get the market rate for electricity for the solar electricity that goes back into the grid. And essentially anything you take, any conventional energy you take, would be at the aggregation price.
So you could participate in the program and you would still receive essentially the payment for selling electricity back to
That's correct. Yes.
So all homeowners would continue to pay their same electric bill, or does it?
There's still one bill. The only thing that changes on the bill is the name of the supplier, and again, the price per kilowatt hour. Essentially. National Grid services the account, does the billing, takes care of any emergencies, totally takes care of the infrastructure. They don't care where the electricity comes from because they're making their money on the distribution and transmission of the electricity and maintaining the system.
So that's why the solar contracts stay in place, because it's all still changing hands through National Grid?
That's correct.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Although there's a section on my bill that shows the amount that was, I don't even know, that reduced my overall bill, and then once or twice a month, I get a check from National Grid.
So
would I continue to get those checks?
Yes.
Totally separate. And
from National Grid?
Yes. Yes, from National Grid.
So
But what about the reduction in my bill?
So the two, I'm going to speak from this because I'm in the process of putting solar panels up on my house in Providence, so many questions I've had to our installer. And so I apologize if I'm walking through this, what we've already said, but so like you'll have an agreement to sell your electricity that you generate to National Grid at whatever that contract rate that you have is. And then you also have, what the aggregation does is then sets what your rate that you purchase electricity at. So the offset that they provide is still just the offset. So I know like I'm going to make up numbers here, but if you generate if you generate, these are really basic numbers, but you should generate 100 kilowatt hours in a month, but you only used 80 kilowatt hours that month. That 80 is going to be offset by the 100 that you generated. And then what you're going to get is that other 20 kilowatt hours that you generated above that rate, you're going to get a larger check because what you purchase at is smaller than what you're selling at, because the aggregation rate is sending that price down. So that differential between the two rates is going to grow, assuming that we get that lower rate. So the idea then, it actually makes it a better financial investment for solar power because the differential is higher from what you sell them to what you purchase from. It doesn't impact the offsets because the offset is that you generate 1 kilowatt hour and you use 1 kilowatt hour, it just offsets. So this is just for the other side of it.
Wow. So in a hearing before the PUC, they're not setting any rates. They're merely approving the plan. Then they go to each community to approve the plan.
Yep.
But you've said that communities can be bulked together. So is the plan pretty much boilerplate for each community? Is that what?
You're ready to step in on that.
In Massachusetts, our aggregation documents are about 99% perfected, so that the plans that we present for Massachusetts communities are, again, very much the same, because we have to cover certain points in those plans. That'll evolve into the same thing here in Rhode Island.
The legislation wasn't set out with any prescriptive.
Well, no, there are prescriptions within the law, but things that have to be in the plan. There haven't been any plans put together yet. We're developing a plan right now, and we want to put it before the PUC for them to look at that model and say, yes, we like this, we like that, we want changes here, we want changes there, and hopefully that will, satisfy them to go ahead and to move communities forward.
And how long, just a question, Dedham, you said, how long has that contract been? I mean, one of the things that I think people are a little hesitant with any of these is seeing it out a long term. Like, people understand National Grid's going to be here for eternity.
Surprisingly enough, many of the people that we get good comments from, and 99% of our comments are good, is because of the stability of the rates over time. We just renewed contracts in Massachusetts for 36 months. So that's a fixed rate for 36 months, and those people are going to save substantial funds during that time. Because, again, we can go out to bid at strategic points in the market when the utilities are basically restricted on when they can go out to bid. So we're at a very, very good strategic advantage in that case.
I have a question about the bundling of the towns, because we have tried to coordinate with our East Bay neighbors, specifically Warren and Bristol. If they were to agree to aggregate, would our plans be the same, or could Barrington choose to have a little higher renewable?
Each municipality maintains its autonomy through the whole process. Plans are, there would be a plan for Barrington, there'd be a plan for Bristol, a plan for Warren. At the bid day, you can decide you might want 10%, Warren might 5%, Bristol might want whatever. Those things don't change. They can be done. They can go out together, take one bid, and essentially, but again, you have your autonomy on the day of the bid.
Sounds like a plan to me.
And National Grid is still delivers everything, right?
Yes.
Right. So and you mentioned that every consumer gets notified ultimately. How do they get notified? We've gone through things where we provided notice to lots of folks and they still haven't heard. So
we do very intense public outreach and education ahead of bid day, and then during that opt-out period. During that opt-out period, they will get a letter that, like in Massachusetts, that letter has to be approved by the DPU, the Department of Public Utilities, before we send it out. We would imagine that that's going to be the same thing here with the PUC. They're going to want to see the letter, approve the letter before it goes out to all eligible customers. And once that letter goes out, and it'll explain all the things in the program, it's a 2-page letter, both sides, at least that's the way it is in Massachusetts. And essentially, it comes with an opt-out card. So anybody who doesn't want to participate could just send in the card, and they're not in the program. If they do want to participate, they don't have to do anything. They can just be part of the enrollment after that 30-day opt-out period. And again, it's extremely important for public outreach and education that you reach all of your residents. And we do that through press releases. We have public meetings, particularly at the senior center, because many of the seniors are preyed upon by some of these unscrupulous marketers. We have a website. We do interviews with the local TV station. Any channel we can find to help reach the customers is what we do.
Can you give us a little clue as to why someone would opt out? What their reasons might be?
One of the reasons why we're very successful in our programs is because the national suppliers who know how we run a program know that we're going to get 85% of the eligible customers in that program that will participate at the beginning, give or take 1% or 2%. So they know what they're bidding on when they come into the program. So they can sharpen their pencils and give us a very good rate because there's some certainty there. We find in our programs we may start out at 85%, but after they're established and those people who may have opted out talk to their friends and neighbors and find out, oh, this isn't a bad deal, they call us and they opt in. So many of our programs go from 85% to 90, 92. We even have a couple at 95% because people understand it's a good thing. There will always be a certain percentage of people who, no matter what you do, will just opt out.
You mentioned that, I just want to be clear, there's no other community in Rhode Island yet that has a community aggregation plan?
Yeah, up to this point, there's no plans have been put together. At this moment, Providence, Central Falls, and South Kingstown have all authorized resolutions to create a plan. So that's the point of conversation that we're in. We have upcoming meetings in both the Newport and Portsmouth City Councils this month where we are crossing our fingers that we get positive results. And then the other part of our work is that we are constantly calling, meeting with, having conversations with the rest of the towns in the state to see how quickly people want to decide, are choosing to move forward with this. But at this point, there are no residential aggregation plans. There are commercial and industrial aggregation plans and municipal aggregation plans for many of the cities and towns that participate in it, but not actually the community ones.
Okay.
We've received very positive feedback from all of the towns that we've met with. And essentially, we've given, if we haven't met with them face-to-face, with the town administrator or town manager, we have dropped off information to them and gotten feedback from them. Very positive responses.
Please.
I'd like to make a motion to direct the town manager to proceed with the development of a community electrical aggregation plan for council approval.
I'll second.
Motion's been made and seconded. I do want to, we have an opportunity here to hear some of the feedback. So I would like to hear and ask if we could have our chair of our Economic Development Committee, Mr. Hum, if you could tell us what the Economic Development Committee has done on this.
Thank you. Robert Hum, Chair of the Economic Development Committee, 21 Woodland Road in Barrington. Just to point out at the outset, I'm reporting on the meeting and acting as a representative on behalf of the Economic Development Committee. I actually abstained from the decision itself to approve the council moving forward based on my former role at National Grid as a regulatory attorney. So I just wanted to remove from that, but I was there just to provide any factual-based expertise or anything like that. And I'm happy, from the same perspective, to provide any factual-based expertise or answer any questions from the utility side and also from the Economic Development Committee side, as long as we stick to the facts. So we received a presentation from Mr. Rose and Mr. O'Rourke and asked a lot of questions. It was a lengthy meeting, especially by our standards. Lots of questions, and all of our questions were answered. I think at the end of the day, the Economic Development Committee saw very little risk and potentially significantly high reward by way of the savings. Some of the factors that went into that was the steady rate throughout, the amount of work that that Good Energy or whichever company is acting on behalf of the town would put in to make sure that they're getting the best rates possible. As you saw from one of the slides, it was a multi-step process starting with the resolution. And the Economic Development Committee thought that, approving a resolution to move forward and explore further seemed like a really good idea because you're not making a commitment yet. You're just committing to exploring it further. And from there, Good Energy would be taking all those different steps that you saw, putting in the outreach at no cost to the town, which the Economic Development Committee saw as a benefit, working with the PUC on behalf of the town, which, again, was a benefit because it was at no cost to the town. Working on the bids itself, and even as they're working on the bids, there's still no contract with the town, so the town's not on the hook for anything, which the Economic Development Committee saw as a positive. And kind of throughout, that's where the no-risk portion comes in. And then the town has the opportunity to work on the contract and negotiate the contract, in the best interest of the town. So those were a lot of the key elements that the Economic Development Committee thought it would be a good idea to recommend that the town council approve the resolution, and it sounds like that's the road that you're on right now. The other thing we discussed, which the council started to talk about right at the end of the presentation, was the bundling, working with some of the other towns. It sounds as if you can work with any town, whether it's Providence or Warren and Bristol. The indications to the Economic Development Committee were that the towns of Warren and Bristol, even though it hasn't gone to their councils yet, the town representatives were very interested in the idea and were also interested in the potential to bundle. And again, that would just, you would get the supply at even a lesser rate. So the Economic Development Committee thought that was something to further explore, whether it go that direction or not, just something to take a look at.
Great.
So I'm probably missing a few things, but if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, it made me think of a question. I don't know if it's better for you to answer for the folks from Good Energy, but are commercial customers also eligible for this, or is it only residents?
Yes, and so I was just going to say yes, and obviously that was an interest of the EDC as well. Kind of that being kind of the role to look out for the businesses there, but yes.
Okay, that's good.
Eligible customers for the aggregation are anyone on the basic service of National Grid.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate you considering this. I would ask our chair of our Resilience and Energy Committee if he could come forward and let us know what that committee thought of this. I'm actually the liaison to both committees, so I was present for the presentation to Resilience and Energy, which took place a few months ago. please.
Good evening. My name is Robert Hart at 6 Wright Place in Barrington, Rhode Island, and the chair of the Resilience and Energy Committee. We took up this issue earlier this year, and we had discussions with good representatives from Good Energy and Green Energy Consumers Alliance, and the committee felt this was a great opportunity for the town. You know, it's very common these days to aggregate. You know, I just participated in an auction for the state aggregating its collective load. You know, with prices set to increase over time with the issues of constraint with natural gas in New England, you know, it's very likely that rates are going to rise over time. So locking in rates over a period of 3 years is a good benefit. And we felt that this was a way at scale for the town to increase its renewable content and its energy. My house, my personal house, has shading, so I can't put panels up on my roof. But this is a great opportunity for me and other homeowners like myself to be able to increase the content of our renewable energy. So the committee was unanimously behind this, and we're glad to see that the Economic Development Committee also is behind it. And we think, we also, in my discussions with Good Energy, got a really good sense that they would be a good partner for the town.
Thank you. Any questions? Thank you very much.
There's actually one piece that the name was up here, Green Energy Consumers Alliance, and Rob just mentioned it, and I realized I neglected to say it beforehand. One of the partnerships that Good Energy has sought to forge is with Green Energy Consumers Alliance. It's a regional nonprofit that focuses on developing renewable projects just in New England. Our partnership with them means that they're our preferred supplier of the renewable energy credits for any aggregation that we work with. And that allows us to actually track back exactly which renewable energy projects are being supported by the electricity usage of the individual municipalities. I mean, as I think John has said before, it's like farm to table for renewable energy. Like, know which solar array or wind farm that your electricity is coming from, which is not something that a lot of other folks are able to deliver on because you need to have a local supplier for it. And so we've had a real pleasure of forging this relationship with Green Energy Consumers Alliance to help make this aggregation also create market demand for more renewable energy in region and not from Canadian hydropower or Texas wind farms, but how do we create a decentralized, like, local supply of renewable energy? And that partnership has allowed us to do that. And yeah, I just wanted to left that out.
Green Energy Consumers Alliance used to be known as People's Power here in Rhode Island. They recently changed their name. When in Massachusetts, when we had municipalities that wanted real demand for more renewable energy in their fuel mix, we researched the situation and we found that at that time their name was in Massachusetts was Mass Energy Consumers Alliance. They are the gold standard in Massachusetts and Rhode Island for what we call preferred Class 1 RECs, which means they can tell us where that energy is coming from. Whereas if you get RECs, renewable energy certificates from suppliers, they can't tell you where that energy is coming from. We want to make sure that any funds that are going toward renewable energy credits are helping support additional projects here in Rhode Island, Massachusetts, and the remainder of New England, which are, again, free of biomass. They're not New York or Canadian hydro. They're local projects that we can point to and say that's where that energy is coming from.
Thank you. Any further discussion? We do have a motion made and seconded. Ready to vote? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No abstentions and one recusal. The motion carries. Thank you very much. And I will be making a call to Bristol and Warren, my counterparts there.
Have a good night. Thank you.
You might want to jump with Providence, Central Falls, and South Kingston.
Yeah.
You can bundle with anybody.
The next item on our agenda is to discuss and act on the ratifying the Public Works United Steelworkers, AFL-CIO, CLC, Local 14845, International Brotherhood of Police Officers, Local 351, Dispatch, International Brotherhood of Police Officers, Local 555, and the International Association of Firefighters, AFL-CIO, Local 1774, collective bargaining agreements. Is there any discussion on that, or are we ready to vote to ratify those? Do I hear a motion?
I'll make a motion to ratify the 3-year, July 1st, 2019 through June 30th, 2021, collective bargaining agreements between the Town of Barrington and the United Steelworkers, AFL-CIO, CLC, Local 14845, and the International Brotherhood of Police Officers, Local 351, BPD, International Brotherhood of Police Officers, Local 555, Dispatch, and the International Association of Firefighters, AFL-CIO, Local 1774.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And no abstentions. The motion carries. Thank you. Next item on our agenda is to discuss and act on the Town Council strategic offsite. This was proposed by our town manager to take a kind of bigger picture look. We deal with sort of the individual things that come before us. Our committees do deal with the big picture a lot, as we've just seen with our two committees who recommended the motion that we just passed for community aggregation. But we don't often get a chance to do that, and I think that's the goal. I'd ask Jim, could you sort of take us through what you had in mind?
Thank you, Mr. President. In our discussions with individually, when I met with each of the councilors, I think we talked about this, at least with most of you. And the thought was that we can only meet at these meetings in a quorum, and sometimes we lose sight of the big picture as we're involved in the minutia of trying to get ordinances passed and that type of thing. And I thought it might be a good idea, since we had a fairly stable council for at least the next 14 to 16 months, it might be time to take a look at our agenda and what initiatives we'd like to pursue, and help give me and the department head some direction as to things that you think are important, that are important to you as a council, that we can work towards. And so, you know, initially I was thinking an afternoon with an overnight and a morning session, and I know you're all real busy, so I've kind of honed that down to probably a late morning to early afternoon session with some discussion over a lunch somewhere, that we could do this. Now, it would fall under the Open Meetings Act, so, but, you know, certainly the public would be invited, but the discussion, the agenda for the meeting would be, I would make a proposal to you and add or subtract as you see fit.
I have a couple of comments. I think it's a great idea. I do remember when I was first starting out, it was 15 years ago, that we had a workshop with all the land use boards and commissions, and it included the town council. And I believe it was Andy Tights who actually explained to all the boards and commissions what their role was, what their jurisdiction was, whether they were advisory or a board that actually made legal decisions, and what their parameters were. And it was very helpful to me at that time, because he also explained what the powers and parameters and of the town council were. I would like to see that it would be helpful for me as a reminder, and I think it would be especially helpful for the newer members of the council to understand that. I also would like to point out that, as far as I understand, the town council's strategic plan is actually the town's comprehensive plan. and that our mission statement is dictated by the town charter. I just want to put that out there, that we are not, like the school committee, developing our own strategic plan, although there are certainly, I look forward to telling my fellow council members what I would like to see accomplished in those 14 months, what have you, and I'm eager to hear what my colleagues would like to see done as well, so I think it's a great idea.
I agree. I think it's a very good idea for us to all kind of have the opportunity to dive deep onto some larger topics. One that I know I'd really like to look at and discuss, and the timing is, I think, well suited for it, is to set some budget priorities for next year as we're approaching the beginning of budget season, to look at how we might want to evaluate some of the recent initiatives of the last couple of years, and maybe discussing what we might want to make priorities going forward.
I think it's a great idea. I'm hesitant to do it outside of Barrington. I think that we've got a $58 million middle school we could meet in, as well as a very funky Bay Spring Community Center that we could meet in that would just be a different vibe than this space. It also might be helpful to have somebody that kind of leads a discussion. I mean, this is a huge list of ideas and issues, and this could be a months-long, workshop. So I would, think that we would kind of get it to everybody's top one or two things, and possibly have a facilitator that kind of moves us along in discussion and focus, rather than just kind of everybody making their own pitches, and kind of, if it's going to be a tight afternoon, I think it might be best done that way. But I think it's a great idea to kind of get us focused. I like the budget idea. I'd add on this list economic development in town. So certainly I think it would be a well-done afternoon for sure. So
I agree. I had written at the top of my sheet under location in Barrington. I think it's important for it to be here.
I'd just like to make one comment about that. When we were involved in the town manager search, we met, I think it was the trusts.
Yes, East Providence, right on the trail.
East Providence. And because I realize that this is open to the public, and that's fine, but the public will not be included in the discussion, so this isn't really a workshop as such. And I felt that there was some kind of a different kind of focus that we were able to manage because we weren't in Barrington. So
by 2 miles.
Yeah, but it was different enough that, I don't know, I felt like that was helpful. It really focused us in on what we needed to do. But so I appreciate the offsite almost more as a retreat, even though it's not, because it has to be. And I appreciate that it is open to the public, but I view this as more of a discussion that we can have amongst the 5 of us.
I agree. I think that for purposes of this discussion, we have public hearings on a number of things, and we always take public comment. But for purposes of this, I think it would just make more sense, particularly given the volume of items that we may want to address for it to just to be a discussion of us. That doesn't mean that people can't come and watch, but I think in order to take the best advantage of our time in doing this, we should probably not have public comment. And Mike, we're not required to have public comment. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah,
I completely agree with
Yeah.
that. I mean, I think that it is a working session for us.
Yeah.
And not a public discourse, but I do think we want to make it so that the community feels comfortable hopping in and just sitting like they sit and watch our council meetings.
Okay. I do not want to hold it here. I don't think this is a great...
I agree. I 100%.
Yeah,
should be facing
definitely somewhere we could, sitting around, and this only curves a little bit.
But it sounds like we've got, two members who do want to hold it in town. I thought of that place myself because I thought that was, it was useful to have that as an alternative to meeting here at the town hall. That was the League of Cities and Towns offices that are in East Providence. I think they're in Rumford. They're right on the Wampanoag Trail. I'm open to either. Steve, do you have an opinion on where to meet?
I'm indifferent. I think wherever would be fine.
Okay.
Table's a table.
Okay. So, do I hear a motion to direct the town manager to schedule a 1/2-day town council strategic offsite at a mutually convenient time of the month of, actually, why don't we just say within the next 3 months, if you can send around, Mary can send around, requests, we'll see what date works for everyone.
Yeah, and we can openly, you can discuss those dates back and forth on email since it's just a scheduling issue. So I'll send a primer email out and ask for some feedback about location and date times, and we'll work it from there. But we'll shoot for no later than January 1, and hopefully not during the holiday season.
So do I hear that motion?
So moved.
Made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next item on the agenda is to discuss and act on the Barrington Heritage Hall of Fame. This is actually part of the agenda. Jim and I have been talking about this for several months. This was Jim's idea to have a Heritage Hall of Fame. What we're trying to do is really recognize people who have made significant contributions to the town. I know I sound like a broken record every time I'm talking about our volunteers. We have extraordinary people who give a lot of time and a lot of talent to this town. We just had 2 volunteers who I suspect could find something better to do on a Monday night, who stayed through a long meeting to give us reports from their commissions. We have a lot of people like that in town, and I think it'd be worthwhile for us to recognize that, because I think that's good for us to take a moment to thank them, but also I think it can be a very good example as well. Jim, do you want to take us through the Barrington Heritage Hall of Fame?
Yes, sir. So this is just my initial thoughts as to how I thought it might operate. Eligibility, you'd have to be a present or former resident of Barrington. And we're looking for people who have made a significant contribution to Barrington through either civic service or philanthropic contributions. Posthumous selections are acceptable. Selections will be limited to 5 per year, because I wanted to make it significant, not name 30 people. The process for selection is to form a selection committee, and I put to be selected by the town manager. And the reason I did that was because I think it would be very difficult to have a selection committee talk about who should be selected at an open meeting. And so, just like with the Census 2020 appointments, to appoint a committee of 10, certainly recommendations would be helpful, that I would ask to serve on this committee. They would probably only have to meet twice, I would guess, kind of to cull the herd down and then to make final selections. And the nominations could be submitted by any Barrington resident, but you'd have to be a resident to nominate someone, and it'd be on a standardized form, so the committee's looking at the same facts, or the same formatted facts, as they try and make their selections. For a timeline, I was looking at the town clerk. They'd be due to the town clerk by January 31st. They could meet during February, and at the March council meeting, the council could approve the selectees and announce them. And then one of the things I think would be really a great community thing to do would be to have a dinner. And I know East Providence does this every year, but to have a dinner at Rhode Island Country Club where we officially induct these people into the Barrington Heritage Hall of Fame. And unlike my first memo, we actually wouldn't give them the plaque, but we'd give them a plaque. And I'd also like to create a plaque in Town Hall where, every year we would add the year and the names of those people as it builds. But to have a community event where we had a dinner and each person was recognized individually and given some small memento that would recognize them, I think would be a great community building activity for us to have. So timing, that's just kind of my thoughts after Mike and I talked about it, and I would certainly, whatever your pleasure is, but I think it's a great idea for our community.
Thoughts? Anyone?
I think it's a lovely idea, and I find myself in a weird position because I'm not usually concerned about this. But who pays for all of this? Who pays for the dinner? Who pays for the plaque? Who pays for all of this? And that's...
Yeah, I would think that the dinner for the inductees would probably be, and the plaques would be paid for by the town. We don't have a budget line item for that, but $500 a year would probably be more than sufficient to cover that. There'd be an initial outlay for the big plaque, I guess, but I can't imagine it'd be too expensive. And the other guests at the dinner would be on their own dime, except for the selectee, would be my going in position.
I raise this question only because I would assume that at this ceremony, somebody representing the town, such as the council president, would need to speak. And I'm a little concerned about those of us who might want to attend. Comes back down to how much money, we need to spend for a meal to speak at a public event.
I guess I'm looking at that as sort of more details that we can probably work out later. At this point, the bigger issue would be whether we all think this is a good idea, and second, whether we think the structure that Jim has kind of broadly laid out, particularly with the manager appointments versus council appointments. That would be, the difference is, obviously the Open Meetings Act applies if we make appointments to a committee. And I think that after that, in terms of the other issues, we could probably work those out.
I think it's a great idea that Jim chooses, because I'd be concerned that politics would enter into this as well, depending on the profile of the selected people. I'm a little concerned about that. And I wondered if five strikes me as a lot of names. And this plaque is going to be enormous if there are 5 names added every year.
Yeah.
That was my initial
So
feeling.
the 5 is something I had circled also. I think for a first year, 5 is a great number, but after that, maybe just 2. Because also, look at this in terms of longevity. 15 years from now, yes, we have a lot of fantastic volunteers in this town, but year after year, if you're always taking 5, because a lot of the same people are volunteering every year, I think you start to catch up on the people who are still in town that you want to recognize, and waiting for new people to emerge could then start to take a little less of the kind of power and meaningfulness away if it's always a high number. So maybe it's an initial class with a higher number and then smaller amounts in subsequent years. I also think that the town manager appointing the people is a great idea. Maybe 1 or 2 people from the council can be part of each group. And another thing I had concern on, and it's reflective also of the boards and commissions that we do appoint, is I don't think members should be able to be reappointed. I think this particular group is something where churn is very good. So one thing I think would be nice as part of an award would be being able to be on the committee the subsequent year. That's just a thought. And then I had also underlined the recognition dinner out of concern over cost. I think to do a dinner that's done right, that's done kind of the level that something like this should be, it could get very expensive if the town is subsidizing or paying for it, or it could be prohibitive for people wanting to attend to show support for their friend or family member. But if it's, $50, $75 at Rhode Island Country Club or something like that, maybe they can't. We have a big parade and talking ceremony at Memorial Day. That could potentially be a time, even if we add a barbecue or add an element to that, it also then has already drawn out the whole town, so it's really in front of everybody. Just another idea. But
we have a beautiful auditorium at the middle school. I mean, we could just have a special council meeting and, have a recognition ceremony.
Oh, and refreshments.
Yeah, with refreshments after. I mean, we don't have to go to the dinner, but.
But yeah, those, like President said, it's those are details. I think in all very supportive of the general structure.
Yeah.
It was really nice.
I guess I wouldn't want to do it on Memorial Day because I feel like that's a day.
Taking away from,
That's a day that we don't want to shift the focus at all. What about the issue of the town manager? I believe that's a good idea too, to have the town manager do the appointments. That removes, we would still be ultimately selecting from the recommendations of this board, but what does the rest of the council think? We've got.
Wait, we would?
They would make a recommendation, and we would then, the selection according to the.
I didn't see that.
My proposal has you ratifying the selectees. Well, at least that was my intent.
Tell them they want.
Were you going to turn someone down, Kate? Because that's really awkward.
No, I didn't think we were part of the selection at all. I thought the selection committee would choose the.
And that's all up for discussion. I mean, this is.
I guess I feel like.
I think it's actually awkward if we have to approve.
Yeah. No. We just announce.
Yeah.
I'm indifferent. One thing that I thought was important, though, was the number, and I think it needs to be bigger than we expect. Because right now it's saying limited to 5, but the posthumous selections, I mean, there's 300 years of residence to do. Well, I mean, it's no small thing, right? So, I mean, you have Benjamin Medbury, right? He's a, well, it's, you know, if we're really talking about Barrington's
Unless
heritage.
you're on the select committee, I don't know if anyone is going to recognize Benjamin.
Okay, well, Benjamin was 19 years old when he was killed in the Battle of Rhode Island during the Revolution. And he lost a brother, I think, the same year, and then his father the following year, and his mother survived them all, right? And if we're going to talk about 300 years, I would be afraid that if we start to limit the number, what we'll end up with is a Heritage Hall of Fame that reflects the decades that we've lived in, and ignoring quite a bit of history. I mean, you mentioned Memorial Day, and you think of at the gates when they start reading off the names of all the Barrington residents who have died more, and you say, you know, there's a lot of names in there that people ought to be thinking of that had a lot to do with where we are today in town. And I'd hate for it to just be a narrow cross-section of, you know, between all of us, you know.
What if...
50 years maybe you've been in town, Kate, 50 years, 60 years, you know, whatever you make it. But
it should be looking, I think.
So just saying it's limited.
Maybe it could be one or two people who are from
it could be
decades.
Well, I think that's where we leave it to the committee.
And
you know,
then,
the committee can make a reasoned judgment, you know, who should we be appointing.
Or the first couple years, you can do larger groups of posthumous inductees.
I mean, I'd just say if the committee is thoughtful, they will understand that their job is not to make this, you know, as many people as possible, and they'll do their job. Let them run with it. But if we limit them, you know, right now it says it's limited to 5. There could be a year they say we think we should do 2. You know, we're just not requiring that. So.
And posthumous selectees are a lot less expensive too, because they don't need a plaque.
They might have,
or dinner.
They might have big families, though.
Joy, what do you think about the issue of appointment, whether that should be the council or...
So my, you know, typical urge would be that it come from the council and that we're involved in the selection of the committee, but I completely understand the open meetings section of that piece. I do think that kind of just giving it all over, I'd be more comfortable seeing criteria kind of listed somewhere before we act on this. Just that we have a role in establishing kind of its parameters. And I, you know, certainly don't love former residents. I really think that kind of keeping its focus on residents of Barrington would be my first choice. So those are kind of my...
I think developing a criteria for the selecting group is a really good idea.
So I guess maybe a question for the solicitor. Would this award, if no monetary value is tied to it, be considered business of the town?
I'm not sure I understand when you say be considered. So if you're awarding...
So we can all get together and talk about the weather because it's not the business of the town.
Right.
Right, so would it be a violation of the Open Meetings Act if a committee that the council instituted met and discussed...
Correct. Any committee that you create is subject to the OMA, the Open Meetings Act.
Right, but the OMA is a governing body, has a meeting, and discusses business of the town. Would this be considered business of the town?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, there are AG, Attorney General opinions on
this
basically any committee that, if you appointed a committee to discuss the weather, that committee, because it's a committee you created,
that's their business.
Yes.
That's unfortunate.
So that's why I think it's a good idea that Jim creates the committee.
So just to come back to the idea, I think they certainly would make recommendations. I think it would be awkward if we were to reject the recommendations. But I think having the governing body of the town bless the nominations gives it kind of more oomph. And it's...
It's weightier, yeah.
Yeah, I'm not being very articulate, but I just feel that if we, it would come before us. I suppose, in theory, we could reject it, but this isn't. I mean, that would be odd if we rejected it.
It does protect it against being politicized on both sides. If the committee making it was ever politicizing it, the council would check it, and the council can't politicize it because the committee isn't appointed by them and they're making the recommendation. And it does also, as you said, add the weight. And if it's going in that direction, then to Steve's point, it could then, the first committee could make a recommendation to the council for what the number should be and why. So it doesn't have to be locked into a specific number.
Well, so one of the things that I understand the sort of desire to have criteria for it, but I'm inclined to say I trust the people. I don't want to constrain them too much. I want to, I thought Jim's description, somebody who's made a significant contribution to the town, is probably a good way to do it without getting too specific into it. Yes, please, come forward. Sure.
Kathy LaRiviere, 29 Rosedale Avenue. I think that Mr. Kuna, if you accept his proposal for this, and he possibly nominates a committee or appoints a committee of 5, that you could trust that maybe they would come up with criteria that they wouldn't come up with specific criteria, because as Mr. Bayajian gave you an interesting person in history that could be nominated, whereas he might also nominate me because I'm a volunteer, or he could even nominate Mrs. Weymouth because she has been a volunteer that has done a lot for this town, or someone else for a totally different reason. People have given time and effort for all different reasons. So trying to come up with criteria, it would be so difficult. It would be extremely difficult. As you said, that I can understand why you'd want criteria, because some people have left town. So actually, being a resident might not actually be the right criteria. Some people lived here for many, many years. One of the founders of Tappan has now moved to California. And those people certainly are deserving for the Hall of Fame also. So that might not even be a good criteria, that they were a resident, that they be a resident of the town now. So I think you're kind of beating yourselves up over this issue, and maybe, like you said, you needed a moderator for outside. I'm trying to be your moderator at the moment. I think you really just have the issue of, do you think this is just a good idea to have a Barrington Hall of Fame and trust your town manager to set it in motion? And then when your committee presents your first 5, yes, in fact, you endorse them. It would be your endorsement of of the 5 Hall of Fame, and then moving forward, the 2 for the Hall of Fame, and then let the details be ironed out, as you go forward. I hope that helps.
Thank you. Okay, so we have a proposal, and one of the questions was present or former resident of Barrington. I do think present or former is fine. I can imagine folks who've made great contributions who in their retirement years moved away, but spent a lifetime here and got tired of the cold. So how do we feel about that? Is that acceptable, present or former, generally? Okay. And then there was a question of selections will be limited to 5 each year. There was a suggestion that we make that a question for the committee to deal with. I think that makes sense. Do we generally agree on that? And then in terms of dinner and induction ceremony, we can decide that later. But I think just the proposal as it was, without that, we may decide to do a dinner at some point, but we'll figure out those details at a later point. So with those changes to the proposal, we don't actually do this. We don't make a motion for this, right? But we're not appointing the committee, so...
No, no.
All right.
Just a quick question before we do, and maybe you haven't thought of it, Jim. How many people are you thinking would be on this committee, I think?
I was thinking 10.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
But it's still unclear to me. It says announce, it's announced at the council meeting, but it doesn't say that we have the final say. And that... I don't know. I understand the weight. I get that.
Okay. So...
Well, I had also made a comment about members not being reappointed, or at least not consecutively.
Maybe you ought to have a 2-year term.
Yeah, maybe. I mean,
that actually has to be decided by Jim, right?
Yeah, I feel like that's a manager thing. If we're going to make this a manager appointed, I don't want anybody to say that we're trying to do it.
Micromanaging.
Yeah, or doing an end run. We're trying to remove some politics from it, let the manager do this, and I'm sure that he's open to suggestions like that, but I don't want to, I'm concerned about us saying...
Okay. I mean, we made other changes. It's fine if we don't want to make that one, but we made other changes to this, so I don't think it's fair to say that's micromanaging, but other changes weren't. But
okay. So then the remaining issue was the question of whether the town council would ultimately approve the recommendations, or whether whether they would be approved without town council action. How do we feel about that? I told you my position. I think I like the idea of us approving it, because I feel, we are the governing body of the town, and I think it sends a message that not just this group, but the people of Barrington, through their representatives, have selected these people. I'm sure there's...
we do it, yeah.
Yeah.
I tend to agree with that. I mean, I think of this as like the keys to the city, right? It's always, I don't know, in the movies at least, the mayor or someone gives out the key to the city. It's not up to anyone else. So I think that makes sense. I think it would be a very odd and extraordinary circumstance if there was someone selected that we had a problem with, unless we knew something secret about their background that
Well, okay, just hypothetically, what if somebody was chosen and there was knowledge that that person had sued the town?
I think suing the town would be a disqualification.
I mean, I suppose it might be if any individual member of the council felt that this person was not appropriate for that, they'd certainly be able to vote. My approach to it would be that there would have to be a heavy burden to go against the recommendation of the committee. So I'm imagining we find out something in the interim that nobody knew, but I can't, that would be a pretty rare thing. But we'd all be able to vote our conscience.
Finding out background information is not so rare these days.
Hopefully that committee will at least do a Google search. So with the addition of, well, I guess I'll make a motion with the changes that we discussed, removing selections, the number of selections, and letting the committee decide, with removing the dinner requirement, and clarifying that the council would approve or would have the final approval of the selectees. Did I miss anything else? I make a motion that we approve this proposal.
Second.
Okay, made and seconded. Further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Great. Next item on our agenda is to honor Steve Primiano as the East Bay Chamber of Commerce Member of the Year. There is a proposed resolution. We've been asked, Jim will be presenting the East Bay Chamber of the Commerce Member of the Year, I guess, award to Steve. And so the idea was that if we congratulate him on it, which is what this resolution does, it'd be a nice addition to that.
I'll make a motion to adopt the resolution honoring Steve Primiano as the East Bay Chamber of Commerce Member of the Year as presented.
Second.
Made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next item is to discuss and act on bids. This is the first, the only one is for the police department. This is for a Ford Explorer. Chief.
How are you? Good evening. I mentioned in previous two monthly reports about the unfortunate incident of one of our police cruisers being totaled, responding to a call, and this is a result of that. We need to replace the car. We received the insurance funds from the Rhode Island Interlocal Trust, and in the meantime, there are no 2020 vehicles available yet, unfortunately, from Ford. It's a statewide, actually probably a nationwide issue. We're told that within another 2 to 4 weeks, we may be able to finally see our hybrid that we ordered back in January. But we've been dealing with the City of Warwick on a couple of things, actually. They've been looking at some of our older cars that we've been selling, that we try to sell every now and then. We try to get rid of some of the older ones that we use currently for details. And they made us some good offers on some of our older cars. And in the meantime, we learned that they had two 2019 police SUVs on hold, and their finances fell through. So we luckily he mentioned that to us, their fleet maintenance manager, and we contacted the supplier that they had already they had went to bid on. They used the Massachusetts state bid that I'm quoting here as well. And we talked to the supplier, was MHQ out of Massachusetts. They have a lot of other, as you can imagine, larger municipalities that they actually were hoping to maybe offer this to. But because Warwick stood up and said, no, we'd like you to offer that to Barrington, they ended up ultimately in agreeing. So I am recommending, hopefully, that the council award us, the state bid has shown the vehicle itself is actually $30,158.25, which is $3,000 less than the 2020 vehicle. And I mentioned at previous council meetings, in addition to the savings on the 2019 as opposed to or I should say as compared to the 2020 vehicle, the transfer of equipment is also, all the older equipment from a 2019 down will be able to be transferred into this car. 2020s, that is not going to be the case. We're still wondering what equipment will not fit, but we're told that the specs are different, so a lot of that equipment will not fit. So there's a second savings. So the total bid price, including the transfer of equipment from the older totaled SUV to the new one, is $33,375.85. And I don't know if you have any questions or how clear I was on that, but
very clear, and it sounds like a great plan. I'm just wondering, is there any reason to purchase that second 2019 while we still
the second, we're going to know in 2 weeks on that final outcome of that. We were told Friday? Last week. Today's Monday. So last week, sometime he told us he will know in 2 weeks whether the city is going to be able to actually fund that second purchase. If not, they're going to work with us, hopefully. So we may have that opportunity. I don't know if I have to come back because we have the hybrid you approved and 2 other normal annual purchase for this current fiscal year already. I guess I would have to come back and get that, even though it is a savings, bring it back before the council if that is an option. I'll bring that back on November 4th. Hopefully we will be able to grab another 2019. I can't imagine, to be honest with you, there's so much demand for it. I can't imagine that they wouldn't even lift that the price isn't even higher just based on the transfer of equipment and the savings. So, but we get the bid on the 19s this thing, and hopefully I will be back next month with another $3,000 savings.
So the accident that totaled the cruiser, is Officer Wiersteck okay?
Yes, he's fine. Both operators actually went for minor injuries just to be checked, but both didn't suffer any substantial injuries. They were released from the emergency room within 2 hours.
I'll make a motion to award the bid for a 2019 Ford Explorer Police Interceptor from MHQ Municipal Vehicles, 401 Elm Street, Marlborough, Mass, in the amount of $33,375.85, including the cost to transfer equipment out of the auto replacement account.
Second. Motion's been made and seconded. I wanted to note, if folks are paying attention, this is actually a new 2019, just to be clear about that. Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. Thank you, Chief. Next item on our agenda is to discuss the proposal and ordinance of short-term rentals. This one, we talked about adding this, drafting a resolution, and we wanted to, I wanted to kind of bring it up because I felt like in the last meeting it was very late when we talked about this. And so before we kind of go further, I wanted to have us talk a little more about this, and then we could decide whether to ask the solicitor to draft this. I have, since hearing this, heard from both sides, folks who have used their homes as short-term rentals Some folks go and during the summer stay at a summer place or stay on a boat and rent their house out for weekends. And I've heard from people who live near short-term rentals, particularly the RISD house, which is obviously not owner-occupied, and there are a lot of big events there too. And so we're sort of getting concern from people who want to continue to rent their homes out, and then concern from people who want to make sure that have concerns about the short-term rentals. So, please.
Ladies first. My biggest issue with all of this is owner-occupied, because that to me implies that the owner is living in the house with some sort of accessory apartment or basement or something that they rent out. Whereas, for instance, that the idea that if you do go somewhere else for the summer, or you're on your boat and you want to rent your house for short term, I think people should be able to do that. And I'm wondering if there's a different term that could be used, like that the residence that they are renting short term is their primary residence, or...
The owner-occupied piece wasn't intended to mean that the owner had to be there, but that people couldn't buy it for investment property.
Okay.
So, in other words, and I had used 90 days in the proposal that it could be rented out. You could say 180 days, but the intent was that this is someone's home that they've decided to use part-time as a rental, short-term rental, but it's not an investment property that I purchased that I'm just going to rent time after time after time.
I do feel that some sort of registration is a good thing. We register our cars, we should be registering our guns. I think for purposes of identification of places that have sort of repeat offenses, that we know that particular place has developed into a problem as a short-term rental because they have registered. I'm not all that keen on having it inspected by the fire marshal and the building inspector. I should think that the owner of the property should be able to register that property and state how many bedrooms there are, rather than have it, and I think by code, all of our houses have smoke detectors, and I think that the need for sprinklers is really over the top. It's been my experience that this town gets hung up on parking. And it seems to me that there's a lot of parking discussion in this particular thing. But I do like the idea of a registration.
When I read this, I got kind of concerned that we're really impinging on what people would normally consider their property right. A limitation that something not be rented for any less than 31 days Now, it's probably not common in Barrington, but in lower income communities, it's not at all uncommon to have 2-week rental periods, and you pay your rent every 2 weeks, for example. The owner-occupied thing struck me. Renting for a short period of time might not be uncommon for a landlord who has a rental property and finds himself with a short-term vacancy. You know, so in the interim, until I have another long-term tenant, maybe I'll rent it out by the day. Parking, I mean, we have parking ordinances, and if they're not enforced, we should think about those types of things. The registration was the one thing where I said, you know, that might be what's necessary if there are repeat offenders. But then I got to thinking maybe we could do this before we take another step with the ordinance, which is the houses that are listed for short-term rental are known to us, which ones they are. You just go online and see. And ask the chief for a report, how many calls has he gotten? And figure out, you know, what is the problem residence? Are we aware of which one it is? And send a very stern letter to the person saying, the next time the police are out there and they find a violation of the ordinance, someone's getting booked. And they might think about letting their guests know that their vacation could be ruined when the wife has to go bail out the husband because of whatever. But I just feel like some of the provisions in here, they cross lines that I'm just not comfortable crossing. Talking about the number of people who occupy a property, for example. You know, it wasn't all that long ago there was a decision about that. And they said it could be discrimination on familial status when you do that kind of thing. Because what you're really saying is, are we comfortable having you people living together, even if it's for a short period of time? And I don't want to start dictating that. You know, I do feel, you know, I forget his name, but the gentleman who was here who said, you know, I'm living next door to one and it's just really ruining my quality of life. I can imagine that, right, if it's happening weekend after weekend after weekend. But let's find out where the holes in our existing ordinances are and get the police to take care of the situation.
My thinking was right in line with that. Not going the step of looking and identifying the houses and asking about them, but what I was curious about is what happens now if I have guests at my house and they're making a lot of noise and a neighbor calls the police. Are the people making the noise responsible, or is the property owner, am I responsible? So we don't need a registration. If a house is being called, or if calls are coming because of a property, we know who the owner of the property is, and they're the one. I think we need to maybe say to prevent coming down with a heavy hand and saying this is the new law. We can say let's have much stricter enforcement of the law that's already there to prevent people from having their quality of life impacted by short-term rentals.
I happen to be at a home yesterday that is not owner-occupied, that is a short-term rental, and it's the beach house or the pink house. It was used, the groom's family used that as a place it was a great idea. You know, I forget how many bedrooms that has, a ridiculous number of bedrooms. And that's, whoever owns that, that's their whole business model, is to rent it out in short term. They don't have a long-term tenant. And, you know, I've been to fundraisers there, and people rent it out at various times for this kind of event. It's a tough one when you're dealing with somebody who has to live next to a place that is called a lot, but it seems like we ought to be able to enforce the existing rules. I have always thought most people who do this probably want to do it the right way, so I was considering the registration idea. I really like the idea of just posting something, requiring folks who do this to post something that says, you know, be good neighbors, here are the noise ordinances in town, remember you're in a neighborhood. But I don't want to ask now that folks register, particularly since our Economic Development Committee recommended against this. So I do hear the folks who are upset about it, but I think that maybe we can look at trying to enforce our ordinances a little better, or strengthen them if we have to.
I completely agree. I think this is pretty heavy-handed, and I think let's, touch base with the police and find out if there's houses that are kind of repeat offenders, and look at, what statutes we already have and maybe strengthen them if they need to be strengthened. But I think kind of taking this approach really puts a big chill on lots of people and just kind of the comfort they have in their own home and the ownership of that home.
Can I, regardless of how we go forward on this, I'd like to suggest that for our next meeting, maybe the chief can just take a look at it during the period and see if there are tools that he doesn't have that he would like to have that we can provide that could help with enforcement, or, for all I know, there is a lot of enforcement and it's dealt with a lot. I've gotten complaints, I don't have the experience of seeing whether it's a regular problem at particular places, so.
And I'd like just to follow up on what I was saying. I mean, if we can identify particular properties that have had repeat calls, I think how many, what was the nature of the call, when was it, what time of week, what time of day, that would help us understand sort of how widespread the problem is. If it's a couple of houses, easy to identify, then easy to deal with.
In the meantime, I think it has created a problem. I know in our neighborhood, it's become extremely awkward because, people are hesitate to create bad blood by calling the police every weekend in the summer when the house is rented out, because the owners are gone for the entire summer. And but for the other months of the year, they're your neighbor. And I know that in our neighborhood, there is a situation that makes it very uncomfortable to continually report to the police. And I'm not sure it's...
Well, I agree. I've gotten 2 or 3 calls from people who didn't want to come speak.
Right.
They just wanted to convey to me their concerns because they don't want to be that guy, that is complaining, but they're uncomfortable with it.
Maybe the solicitor's office can send a letter to the owners saying, short of a new town ordinance that's going to regulate all properties, here are some concerns that have been expressed from people in your neighborhood. Because it does seem like there's 1 or 2 specific properties that's causing this. And having good neighbors, maybe they're not fully aware of how big of a problem it is for everybody else.
I think these particular owners are very aware, okay. And so what?
So maybe I don't know, but I think a letter.
How you handle that, but.
I mean, it strikes me that it's not the person who would call the police who should feel awkward in the situation, right? They're not causing the problem. The problem is the bad neighbor that they have who wouldn't think to say, I have neighbors. You can't behave like that. But I don't know that we can legislate being good neighbors. so much as...
A fine starts to eat into the profits.
Right, I mean, we abide by the town's ordinances or else...
But there are no fines.
Well, there are.
What's the penalty for noise violation? Repeated noise violation?
But if it's it has to be of a certain decibel level. And there are very few, I believe that there are very few occasions that people are fined for, a rowdy crowd. But a rowdy crowd every single night of the weekend, every weekend of the summer, there's no fine. It's just that constant.
But I do think, I think, most people, there may be some people who won't care, but most people, if they got a letter from the solicitor telling them that they were a repeat problem, it doesn't even have to, you can point out the ordinances. That might, I'm sure there are folks who would totally ignore that, but in that case, maybe we should find out. That's why I'm thinking, what tools does the chief not have that could help with enforcement? And even our municipal court. If you could reach out to our municipal court and find out if they feel there are tools that they could use in terms of ordinances that we could pass that would help with an issue of noise or kind of rowdy parties or any other kind of problems that they're seeing.
I mean, I'd just note sort of this draft ordinance in front of us, it doesn't impose any new legal restrictions, save for the ones about how many people can be there. But what they're really talking about is notifying them of the existing laws we have.
Right, but
We're not changing behaviors.
But if the homeowner or the property owner knows that the town is aware that their property is a short-term rental and that we've stated a lot of these in Portland, Oregon, and it's very clear that the property owner doesn't want everybody else to know that they are renting short-term. But there is somebody always there or that can be called if there are problems. And I think that's, if somebody's out on their boat, there should be somebody who is available to respond to a complaint or whatever in their absence. They should be accountable for how their tenants behave. And these particular owners, and I think of the owners of the next door to the people who just left upset, I think I'm concerned about neighbors and accountability for the property owners. But clearly I'm not, I'm in the minority, so that's okay.
But I think the President's idea of a letter being sent just outlining like what we've got on the books already, that we understand this property is being used as a rental during the summer. These are our expectations as a town. From the solicitor, I mean, if that doesn't wake people up saying, yes, we are looking, we know who you are, and we're looking at this property in the summer.
Is that something that the solicitor can do?
I would obviously work in conjunction with the chief of police and the town manager. So I think the idea about getting the statistics, let's see how prevalent it is it in fact limited to 1 or 2 or 3 households in the town? we certainly can put together some correspondence, maybe jointly, from the chief and the solicitor. I mean, we can figure that out. If you want that as a first step before actually going to the ordinance. Now, obviously, a number of communities have adopted these ordinances because of the issues, Kate, you're describing. I'm not sure how prevalent in Barrington it is compared to, say, Newport or some of the other communities, and I think those statistics would be important to have.
Okay, so this was only a discuss in any case because I thought it made sense for us to kind of flesh it out, but I think that's probably a good way forward to gather some statistics and think about whether we need to add some tools. Short of this, then we can put it on the agenda for the next month to get those statistics, or longer if it takes longer. The next item on our agenda is to discuss and act on ordinances, and the first one is an introduction of 2019-24, an ordinance amendment to Chapter 63, alcoholic beverages, to reduce the BVL number of licenses. Do I hear a motion?
I'll make that motion. As you just said, from 4 to 3, and schedule a public hearing for Monday, November 4th, 2019.
Second.
Made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. The next one is a public hearing. I am opening the public hearing into Ordinance 2019-23, an ordinance amendment to Chapter 63, alcoholic beverages on town property. This is one that it is not permitted to have, for example, if someone's having a reception here, to have wine. This would make it, I think, discretionary with the town manager, and I'll open things up for discussion. Is no one from the public here? The chief is always welcome to speak if he wants, or Mike, but does anyone on the council want to be heard on this?
So I had one addition and then one piece for discussion. So the addition is read in the first sentence: no person shall on public property owned by the town of Barrington possess, and then add an open container or consume any intoxicating beverage. My rationale for that, thinking holiday time, an employee, let's say they wanted to give a coworker a bottle of wine or something like that, technically they're not allowed to based on this, and that would just mean you can give it to somebody, you can have it here as long as it's not open. So I just thought adding that. And then the other piece for discussion would be, although I guess it wouldn't work, but the idea being town council also being able to allow it, but thinking if, let's say somebody wanted to have a surprise party or toast for the town manager, but obviously if the council was approving that, he'd be aware, or she in the future. But, so I guess leaving it at that.
So you're suggesting adding possess or consume any...
So after the word possess, adding an open container, and then going on to or consume any intoxicating beverage.
Okay.
Why don't you make that motion?
Oh, so I move to add an open container following possess in the first line.
Motion's made. Any second? Second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. Okay. Next item on the agenda is to set the agenda for the November 4. We talked about the reducing the number of BVL licenses We have public hearing for the liquor license renewals. This is what we do. They come due in December, so we want to get that done in November. We'll have a Save the Bay presentation. We also do the victualling licenses. Continuation. What was that ordinance that we continued?
The land, changing the zoning.
Zoning, that's right. And then also the parking issue for Vermont Ave. And recycling.
The short-term rental statistics?
Yes. And if
I had asked the solicitor's office to draft an ordinance that would, in some cases, clarify or potentially add no e-cigarettes or vaping to be used on any town property, whether fields or the beach.
it's the old language, so it says cigarettes.
Or tobacco. Right.
A lot of feeling in my office is that we need to expand that to include vaping, cigarettes, etc. I think it would be as simple as simply amending what we have by, the definition section just gets expanded.
That's good.
Okay. Anything else?
We also are going back to the minutes of September 9th.
Oh, right. Minutes of September 9th.
I would suggest maybe we all review those. We can watch the video. I've never watched myself, but we can watch ourselves discuss that with a better wording.
Okay.
Sorry, Mike.
Do I hear a motion to move into executive session pursuant to 4246-5A2 litigation, contract continuation, and 4246-5A5 acquisition of property, and to discuss the executive session minutes from September 9th, for placement on the town council agenda for November 4th?
So moved.
Second.
Made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. We are in executive session.